Every puzzle has an answer.
The events of Itadakimasu took place in 2013. That chapter told the story of how one of the most beloved characters in the series, Rem, fell into a coma after being attacked by one of the villains. Not only was she left in a vegetative state, but every character in the cast also lost all their memories of her. Years passed, and Rem remained in that condition. Even after the villain responsible was defeated and killed, there was still no indication that Rem would ever recover. She eventually woke up, and everyone believed that things would finally start to improve. However, that hope quickly faded when it was revealed that she had lost all her memories. To make matters worse, the story took a turn that strongly implied Rem would never regain her memories. As a result, the entire fan base quietly accepted that the old Rem was gone and that they would have to settle for this new version of the character. Then came Arc 9, the current arc of the novel, and with it, the return of one of the villains who had attacked Rem. Due to certain plot developments, this enemy is forced to expel a set of memories from his stomach. From the moment it was announced, fans wondered whose memories had been expelled. While it may seem obvious now that they belong to Rem, several factors had to be considered at the time, making it difficult to reach a clear conclusion. However, the latest chapter of the novel finally confirms the identity of those expelled memories. In this video, I will explain how the process unfolded and how convincing the author's explanation really is. Welcome to the return of Rem. Ever since Rem fell into a coma, there have been two possible solutions to wake her up. The first is to obtain dragon blood, which is said to have incredible restorative properties capable of healing anything. The second is to locate the person who caused this and force them to restore Rem. The problem was that the person responsible was a lunatic who always remained in the shadows and was extremely powerful. He was so strong that even after they found him, he still managed to defeat them. So that option was far from easy. The other option was to obtain dragon blood. It sounds simple, but in the world of ReZero, dragons are nearly extinct. Finding one is not as easy as you might think. To make matters worse, the dragon blood they needed had to be drawn in the final seconds of the dragon's life. Searching for that kind of blood is as difficult as playing a Dota match on a Peruvian server without being insulted for being Peruvian. Due to the complexity of these requirements, the author did not make much progress on Rem's awakening for many years. The first significant development came with the death of one of the archbishops responsible for this tragedy. However, his death did not change the situation much. The girl barely woke up, and neither she nor her allies remembered who Rem had once been. Suddenly, the story shifted its focus to other subplots, and set the amnesiac Rem subplot aside once again. This continued until recently, when one of the archbishops of gluttony vomited up Rem's memories to use them as a weapon in battle. While we now know for sure that the expelled memories belonged to Rem, that was unclear when they were first revealed. There were other potential candidates that needed to be considered. Some believed the memories discarded by gluttony might have belonged to Subaru or Julius, but as we now know, they were wrong. What I find interesting is that many people forget the reasoning Roy Alphard used when choosing which memories to release. First, he did not choose to expel the memories voluntarily. He had to do so to help Aldebaran and harm Emilia. He had to search among all his victims and select someone who met both conditions. The released memories had to belong to someone important to Emilia, but expendable to Aldebaran. Joshua, also a victim of gluttony, clearly did not fit this description. Julius might have been an option, but his connection to Emilia was not strong. However, everything changes when we consider Rem. Even the Archbishop of Gluttony smiles maliciously when Rem is chosen because he knows the consequences will be entertaining. It is said that when he spits out the memories, everyone begins to feel nauseous. The sensation is not fatal, but uncomfortable enough to break one's focus in the middle of a battle. However, the level of nausea varies from person to person. Both Emilia and Aldebaran were affected, but the traitor's reaction was milder, while Emilia's was strong enough to melt the ice weapons she had conjured. What I am about to say is not explicitly stated, but based on my knowledge of this world's lore, I will attempt to explain the phenomenon. When gluttony released the devoured memories, they scattered into the air and instantly reached the Ode de Laguna. The Odd Laguna governs and maintains the world of ReZero. The authorities of Sin use their powers to break and bend the rules of this world to their will. For instance, when gluttony devours someone, it is actually the part of the world responsible for that person's existence that is consumed. Therefore, I deduce that when Roy released Rem's memories, they began reinstalling themselves in everyone who had known her. The reinstallation would be more intense for someone who had a lot of shared experiences with Rem than for someone who barely knew her. This was the case for Emilia and Aldebaran, respectively. In Emilia's case, she was not only close friends with Rem, but also her rival for Subaru's love. Meanwhile, although Aldebaran and Rem have a connection, it does not seem as deep as Rem's connection with Emilia. The most interesting aspect, I think, is how the characters become aware of Rem's return in their memories. None of them seem to realize they had forgotten her until they see her again. I confirmed this when I reread an earlier chapter of the novel that briefly described what it's like to remember someone who's been forgotten. In the past, Emilia was devoured by gluttony, and everyone forgot her when that happened. When this was fixed shortly afterward, the affected characters said they had not only forgotten Emilia, but even when their memories were restored, they still did not immediately realize the phenomenon had ended. Why do I emphasize this? Because I believe it helps explain part of the episode that many are overlooking. When Klein went to bring Rem to where Emilia was, it's mentioned that he took some time, not because anything bad happened, but because of an unexpected event that, according to Klein, was better experienced than explained. To justify his delay, he brought Rem, and at that moment, everyone present started describing the sensations I mentioned earlier. They especially described the feeling that they had forgotten her, and that even though they knew gluttony had restored her memories a few hours ago, they only truly felt it when they saw her again. When Klind went to fetch Ram, he saw Rem and realized that he had forgotten her too, a girl he had taught for years. I imagine this surprised him quite a bit. After all, he had lived with Rem longer than he had with Subaru and Emilia combined. The time it took him to process this explains the delay in bringing the sisters to meet Emilia. Even though everyone feels a strange sensation when Rem enters the scene, it is said that there is no malice in that feeling. I believe it is simply the world finalizing Rem's memory installation in their minds, as described by the sensation. As Rem begins to appear before her other allies, it is likely that characters like Roswal or Frederica will experience something similar. I think that covers everything about how Rem returned. Now I want to discuss what lies ahead for this new version of Rem. Rem's return has divided the fandom. Some are happy about the news, while others are not. Some think her comeback was rushed, and others simply did not like the resolution. Personally, I understand the logic behind her return, but I am curious to see how the author will handle the unresolved subplots tied to amnesiac Rem. Just because she had already awakened without her memories does not mean her character remained stagnant. She lived and had new experiences in that state, ones that made her question who she was in the past and what she should do in the future. So, restoring her memories leaves a strange feeling because it essentially erases all the possibilities built around the amnesiac version of Rem. This brings us to a long-standing debate that may never have a definitive answer. Some argue that it makes sense for Rem to return to her former self because she lived 18 years full of experiences before losing her memories, which far outweighs the 2 months she spent awake without them. From that perspective, it's easy to see why the version with the longer lifespan would prevail. Conversely, some argue that although amnesiac Rem only lived for about 2 months, those months were filled with emotions and experiences that original Rem never had. They believe there is no reason to dismiss the value of the amnesiac Rem's memories compared to the originals. In my opinion, the debate overcomplicates things and misses the obvious. One version will not overwrite the other. Instead, they will merge, similar to what happened with Subaru in Arc 6 and Season 4 when amnesiac Subaru merged with the original. I believe the author will not discard the development of either version, but will show us how the experiences of both versions of Rem coexist within this third Rem, one that combines the best of each. So, let's wait and see what Tape Nagatsuki is planning. Remember that we are following the story on a weekly basis for better or worse, and this limits our perception of the overall arc. Whether we like it or not, we cannot yet see the full arc in its entirety. Additionally, the attention this discussion is receiving causes some fans to overlook other subplots that I personally find interesting. For example, is this current Rem aware of the version of herself that helped Subaru during a failed loop in Arc 6? Now that Emilia has remembered everything about Rem, she's also aware that the maid loves Subaru and is interested in him. This raises the question of how Emilia will react to the idea of Subaru loving Rem just as much as he loves her. Before I go, I want to mention one last detail. Do you remember the futures that Emilia saw? One of the futures she witnessed was a scene in which Rem, wearing her maid outfit, spoke with Subaru. If you're wondering what they talked about, they discussed the meaning of forgiveness. I have no idea who the words are directed at or why, but what caught my attention is that Rem is wearing her maid uniform while Subaru appears to be wearing the same tracksuit he wore when he first arrived in this world. I think there are two possibilities. First, this scene takes place after everything has settled down, and Subaru has changed clothes. He is currently wearing a different outfit, so this wouldn't make sense if it happened soon. Second, the anime might have taken creative liberties and depicted Subaru in his classic outfit instead of his current clothes. In that case, the conversation would be taking place during the climax of Arc 9, the current arc involving Aldebaran's betrayal. Personally, I think the second interpretation is the most likely, especially since the anime clearly emphasized this future more than the others. For this reason, I believe the brief scene we see is actually the conclusion to Aldebaran's arc. While writing and editing this, episode 35 was released, confirming the earlier mentioned theory. The reintegration of memories occurs in two phases. In the first phase, the memories return to the world. In the second phase, simply seeing the person who was forgotten completes the restoration process in the minds of others. This episode tells us what Rem was doing when her memories returned and shows Ram's reaction. It was a great episode that left me feeling emotional. Most importantly, it confirmed that her name was restored along with her memories. This means that everyone can now remember the time they spent with her. I have considered making a video narrating the reunion, but I'm unsure if you would be interested. Let me know, and I will consider it. In any case, that's all for today. I appreciate it if you made it this far, but I would appreciate it even more if you leave a like and a comment to help with YouTube's algorithm. Now tell me, what do you think about Rem's return?